Powkiddy X18S, and on paper, this is one of the most powerful Android-based gaming retro handhelds on the market right now. It comes in at a pretty good price too, at around £160 here in the UK. But just how does it hold up against its competitors, particularly the Odin, when it comes to performance? Well, stick around as we do a full review and a deep dive of the Powkiddy X18S. Let's go. First off, let's talk about packaging and what we get in the box. The answer there is not a lot. Outside of the console itself, you're going to get a USB-C charging cable, as well as some instruction manuals. There's really nothing to this packaging, and I don't really mind that. It's enough to get you started, but don't expect any nice accessories here, like screen protectors. Taking a look around the handheld itself, I must say I actually really like this design. It's got this kind of off-grey style colouring, which is very retro, but yet it somehow seems modern, with its slightly curved edges and its rather Marmite logo. You're either going to love or hate this thing. Personally, I don't mind it. I quite like that it gives it this more futuristic edge, particularly with the LED lighting behind it. It's just a nice little addition. Along the bottom of the device, you do get these two speakers alongside that 3.5mm headphone jack. These speakers are fine. They sound pretty good at a normal volume and have enough depth to them, but bring it up to that higher volume and it just begins to sound tinny and very blown out. I wouldn't suggest using these speakers for long gaming sessions. If you're going to be doing that, I would suggest utilising that 3.5mm headphone jack, or maybe even getting some Bluetooth headphones. But at a push for shorter gamer sessions, these speakers are actually pretty good. Around the sides of the devices, we don't have a lot at all, really. While on the back, we have those 4 shoulder buttons and some of the inputs. The input for the X18S is definitely not its strong point. These buttons do not feel good, and this is going to be a running theme throughout. The outer shoulder buttons are very mushy and have this forcible click at the end, whereas the inner ones have this very haptic click. It seems very strange to have these two very different styles of buttons next to each other. I think I'd have actually preferred to have just had the click of the inner buttons across all 4 of them. Along the top here as well, we do obviously get that micro SD input for up to 120GB of external storage, a micro HDMI, as well as a USB-C cable for charging and data transfer. Now, I really don't like the mini HDMI cables, but if you were to want to use it, you could connect this up to your TV and have a very good gaming experience on the big screen if that was something that you were looking to do. In terms of input, this pretty much has it all. As you may have noticed, this device is very reminiscent of the Nintendo DS with its clamshell design. And this is actually one of the reasons that drew me to it. I liked the idea of having that style of handheld. You've got a nice big screen there that becomes small and compact enough that it can be chucked into a pocket or your bag. Opening it up, that screen is going to click into place, and there are 2 levels of adjustment here. Either that 90 degrees or slightly lower than that. You can't push it flush like you used to be able to do with the Nintendo DS, and it is a little bit of a shame because viewing angles can be a little bit difficult with this screen. But let's talk about that screen. It is a 5.5-inch IPS display at a resolution of 720p. I found that this is perfectly good enough for most emulation experiences. 720p on this screen size is good, especially for Android games and some of the more newer titles, such as the GameCube, or even trying to emulate some of the PS2 range. On the bottom half of the device is where everything really starts to fall apart. That's where all of your inputs are and your controls. It kind of just looks like they threw the controls at this system and they really don't lay out particularly well at all. It feels rather cramped to use and all of these buttons just don't feel very good. Let's start off with the face buttons and the D-pad. All of these have far too much travel and are far too soft. You're actually having to push down to the point that it becomes flush with the body, so you don't actually know if you've pushed it or not. And this is a real deal breaker for many people. For me, however, I can deal with this kind of control. It's not going to ruin the experience for me, but it certainly puts a dampener on it. Same with those analog sticks. These are very much like PS Vita analog sticks. They're very thin, and they allow you a nice amount of movement. However, there is no L3 and R3 here, so many of the newer consoles simply won't be able to play certain games because you don't have that control built in. Looking at these controls, it just feels like there's something missing. There's a big empty space in the middle of this device, which makes me wonder why it's there, almost as if it were meant to have a second screen. Strangely though, the Start, Select and Option buttons along the top are actually the best feeling buttons on this device. I think I'd have actually preferred to have these really clicky buttons across the whole device, from the D-pad to the analog face buttons as well. Looking at those buttons, we have the normal Android buttons for going home, going back and opening multitasking. We have a power button, the G button, which allows you to map controls from the screen to the physical controls. So any game that doesn't natively support a controller will do, much like Genshin Impact. And we also have the volume controls as well. So overall, the design of this I think is pretty good. I like its design cues from the Nintendo DS. Its colour scheme and design is pretty good overall, and I like that it just fits in my pocket and isn't too bulky. However, these controls are going to be a big problem for many people. As I mentioned, for me it wasn't a big issue, but I think for many this is just not going to be a good device to use because the controls do not feel satisfying to use. Let's move away from the bad and talk about the good, because there is a lot of good things about this device. Let's start off with the specs. This comes equipped with the T618 8-core CPU, 4GB of RAM and a Mali G52 GPU. This is a lot of power, certainly for the price point and this style of handheld, and it really does show. I was managing to throw very complex emulation at this thing and it almost didn't break a sweat. Many of the consoles I've used in the past have never been able to emulate N64, GameCube and even PlayStation 2 well. However, this device has managed to emulate many of these games and devices very well. The PlayStation 2 collection is a little bit hit or miss. Some games just will not run at all, some games will require a lot of tinkering in the background. But overall, performance here and specs are just phenomenal for that price point. Let's power on the device and talk about the operating system real quick. As I mentioned, this is Android based, Android 9 to be precise, and this is fine. There's actually not a lot of bloatware here either. It does have a Powkiddy skin on top of the normal system, and this is not a good skin. It's just an awful UI, and I recommend moving away from it as soon as you can. In order to do that, you'd probably want to download an application from the Play Store to override it, and this is where you'll get many of your emulators from as well. Unfortunately, the actual operating system that comes on this device doesn't have the Play Store. You will have to do an aftermarket update on the Powkiddy website. I'll leave a link in the description down below. But after you've done that update, the Play Store will be available to you and you'll have a very functional Android tablet with these controls and emulation devices. The front end I'm showing off here is the Reset Collection. I absolutely love this app. It is a paid app, but it just makes looking through your ROMs and finding a game to play much more sexy and beautiful than ever before. It's almost like a Netflix of games. Bear in mind, this is not an emulator and this does not have all of these games built in. I have sourced these games myself, and also these are just pointing to emulators such as RetroArch or DuckStation. Let's talk about emulation real quick, and emulators. I use RetroArch for the majority of my games, from the Sega to Nintendos and the older devices. When I'm looking to play something slightly newer, I'll use Dolphin and Dolphin MMJR for my N64 and my GameCube. I've got DuckStation for my PlayStation. I have PPSSPP for my PlayStation Portable, as well as a PlayStation 2 emulator here as well. All of these run really well. The controls won't be mapped to start off with, so you are going to have to spend a little bit of time tinkering to set up the controls, but this is fairly simple. And actually is a much more simple process to get started than it is with other devices on the market, like the RJ350 that I spoke about a couple of weeks back. If you want to check out that video, that will be up there or in the description as well. I was absolutely staggered by the performance on this. I'm actually going to play you some of the footage that I've got of a few different consoles and emulators that I've been playing, and you can just see the kind of performance that we're getting out of it here. I was actually blown away as well by just how easy it was to set up a system like this. With the RJ350, I had to spend a lot of time tinkering to get it right, whereas this was an Android-based system. It was simply drag, drop, find the ROMs, find the emulators, and then just tinker with the settings. It was so user intuitive. For a beginner, I think this is a must-have device because of how easy RetroArch was to get into and get set up with, particularly for those Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Color systems. When you're playing, the controls really do start to show their downfalls. This is not a particularly comfortable experience overall. It's fine for the most part, and for shorter play sessions like an hour or two like I do, it's fine. But for those longer play sessions, these controls are going to start to feel uncomfortable super quickly. You can see here, even when I'm running PlayStation 2's The Simpsons Hit and Run, it was running remarkably well. Now, I will admit, this is not the best experience in the world, but it was enjoyable enough that I didn't feel like I was being held back at all from getting into those races and having fun. And that's what this is about, having fun and scratching that nostalgic itch that you may have. Its 5,500 mAh battery does mean that you're going to get a solid amount of performance out of this thing. I was finding 5 to 7 hours of gameplay depending on the system I was using. That's pretty good, and charging is fairly quick too. It normally takes me about an hour to get to a full charge, which is nice. If you're a beginner or want a simple software setup solution, then I really do recommend the X18S. It was really quick and easy to set up and very easy to get into the games as well. If you don't want to have to hassle with Linux, then this system is for you. However, if controls are a really big part of what you want out of a handheld and you want nice feeling controls, this is simply not the device for you, and I would suggest looking at something like the Odin Pro. It's a real shame. It had such a promising performance that was really let down by those controls to the point that it's going to put a lot of people off. Now, this is still the handheld that I go to on a day-to-day basis because it's just so easy and fun to pick up. From its design and its user interface, it's just a nice system overall, especially for that £160 price point. Anyway guys, what do you think of this system? Do you think you could overlook those control shortcomings, or do you think that you will just need to find a better system that suits your needs? Let me know in the comment section down below, and of course, my name's been Robert. This has been Review Clue, and if you enjoyed this video, please do get subscribed down below. It means the absolute world to me. Seriously, we are so close to 2,000 subscribers, and I couldn't be more appreciative of each and every one of you. Anyway, my name's been Robert. This has been Review Clue, and I will catch you in the next one. Adios.